Ye to the haw. So last week, as we kicked off this series, we said that many of us, if you grew up in any kind of faith background, any kind of religious background, you were introduced to a version of Christianity. We all were, and some of us, myself included, were introduced to this version of Christianity we talked about last week. We called it in or out Christianity. That your whole understanding and view of what it means to be a Christian was all centered around what you believed, what boxes you mentally checked off about God. And you made sure that you were checking off the right boxes in your mind and you believed the right things and you put the right religious affiliation on your Facebook because that showed that you were in the club. And that's good to be in the club because this version of Christianity said that the whole goal was to make sure that you believed the right thing so you're in. So when your life was over, you got beamed up to the good place and not down to the bad place. And so many of us, we were introduced to Jesus, to the Bible, to church, to Christianity, and it was all about making sure we were in and not out. And it was all based on what we believe. Now don't misunderstand me. What we believe is so important and it's paramount. But I believe that Jesus is inviting us to do more than just believe. He was never in the I'm going to build a bunch of believers camp. He was up to something more. We said it this way last week, that Jesus isn't inviting us to just believe something, but to become his apprentice. In the first century, Jesus walked the ancient Near East, and he didn't say, hey, here's the good news, believe this, and then just go on with your life. He said, no, here's the good news of the kingdom. Come and follow me. Be my Talmid, my disciple. He's inviting each and every one of us to orient our lives around him to where we follow him and we apprentice him. As we've already mentioned, this is this ancient Jewish blessing that's guiding our thinking in this series. We said it last week, we'll say it again. May you be covered in the dust of your rabbi. This was this beautiful picture that you were following so closely, you were listening so intently, you were wanting to see the world through the eyes of your rabbi, your Lord, that you were just getting his dust all over you. This is what it means to be an apprentice of Jesus. It means that our whole world is turned upside down and oriented around this Jesus. And we said the scandal of this invitation is that yes, Jesus believes that he believes that I can be like him. To follow a teacher was not just to get some facts about him, no, is to become like him. And we said Jesus went around almost on purpose, I'll go ahead and say on purpose, inviting people who felt like they were unqualified, that they didn't have the rap sheet, they didn't have the resume correct. He invited them to come and follow him. So whatever you feel about yourself, here is the scandalous truth. That Jesus is inviting you to be with him, to follow him, and then to become like him for the sake of the world. Because he's not interested in just making people believe things. He's interested in making apprentices of himself. So today on our journey as we continue, we're going to dive into what it actually looks like to see the world through Jesus' eyes. To see the world the way that our rabbi, our Lord, our Jesus saw the world. The way he saw people, the way he saw possessions, the way that he saw the world around him. This is what we're going to be challenged with today, is to see the world the way that Jesus saw the world. I was thinking this last week that the way that you see something, your angle and your time that you're seeing something, it really changes and affects your response to it. Like the time in history you're seeing something, it changes your response. Your angle changes your response. Your vision changes how you respond to everything. Like for example, I took a picture of this last week. Look, it was just last week and I saw that gas had went down under $4 and I was like texting people about it. I'm like, can you believe it? This is amazing. Don't call it a comeback. Gas is so cheap, right? But if we took this picture like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we'd be like, oh man, we're in trouble. This is really, really bad, right? But because of what we experienced this summer with gas prices being so high, this seemed like a great deal. It's changed our response to it from where we were seeing it. I think back to June of 1998 to, let's just call it the shot. It was Michael Jordan's last shot. It was game 6 of the NBA Finals in Salt Lake City, Utah. And the Bulls were like one game away from completing their second three-peat. And so they just needed to win, but they were down by 1, 5.2 seconds left. This happens. A little bit of a 17-footer. It looks like poetry in motion. A little bit of a push-off. We're not going to talk about that. Poetry in motion. Beautiful. Like, it's just incredible, right? And it's the last shot of his career because we don't talk about the Wizards years. And it was just amazing to finish off this. But you know whose like view and whose angle it didn't look beautiful from? Brian Russell's. The guy guarding Michael Jordan was like, this is not happening again, right? There's another angle where you see a bunch of Utah Jazz fans in the background and the shot goes up and they're like, this cannot be happening. It was not joy in their hearts. It was deep-seated despair because the likes of John Stockton, Karl Malone, Brian Russell would never get a ring. From where you're seeing, how you're seeing something, it really does change your response to it. Hypothetical, there was a news alert that everybody got on their smartphone in the middle of church. It looked a little bit something like this. Taylor Swift surprises the world with new album release 1 minute ago. Now, if you're a Taylor Swift fan, and the cool kids tell me they're called Swifties, you're pretty excited. You're like, I don't care what this joker has to say on stage this morning. I'm going to be like, I have one earbud in, or I'm going out to my car and listening to this new Taylor Swift album. You're pretty pumped. That's how you're viewing this news. But just hypothetically, if you were Taylor Swift's last boyfriend, you are not viewing this news in a positive light because you know you're going to be taken to task, right? How you see something, your vision, your view of something, it changes the way that you respond to it. So with that in mind, I want to take us to the text in Matthew chapter 5, where Jesus is giving the Sermon on the Mount, what we like to call around here his kingdom manifesto. He's laying it out where he's found and what he's up to and what his disciples, his followers will look like as they follow him. And Jesus gives this incredible teaching. We're going to start right here. Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but store up for yourselves treasures in heaven where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Now, this is a challenging teaching that he gives, but it's pretty straightforward, right? I mean, Jesus is saying that my followers, the way that you treat possessions, the way you treat your wealth, you should make sure that you're investing it in the right place. Don't invest it in a bunch of stuff that's going to rot away and just fade away. Invest it in heaven. In other words, invest it in things that are going to last for all of eternity. So it's pretty straightforward, even though it's very challenging to us, especially living in the West. But what Jesus says next, it almost like takes us aback. It's so strange. The very next thing he teaches, it feels cryptic. It feels odd for us to read, and it feels like that's really straightforward. But what he says next, like, what are you getting at, Jesus? This is a little strange because Jesus says this, the very next thing. The eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? Now, to our English-speaking Western mind, this is where we're like, okay, Jesus, like you're a little off your rocker. Like we got you a little bit with the treasures in heaven and invest in things that really matter. But like the eye is the lamp of the body, and how great is that darkness? If the light's inside of you, like it just feels weird and cryptic, right? But there's more going on than what might look like on the surface. We have idioms in our language, right? Not idiots, we have those too, but idioms. Figures of speech, things that our grandparents and their parents said and something our parents said that we're like, where did that even come from? But we kind of pick up what they're putting down. Like one of my favorite figures of speech is it's all going to hell in a handbasket, right? You ever heard that one before? Got to be careful now saying that at home with little kids. But it's all going to hell in a handbasket. So, but there's a purpose. There's a story behind that phrase of everything is like scary. Everything is falling apart. You know, in the American gold rush in the 1840s, this is where the phrase came from, that there were men that were lowered down in big baskets into mining shafts to set explosives off, to set things loose. And when they went down in this basket, they called it to hell in a handbasket. And that's where it came from. Another interesting figure of speech idiom that we have is, you know, I just finally bit the bullet and I paid for it. I finally bit the bullet and did it, right? Bit the bullet. And biting the bullet, this figure of speech comes from a time of war when doctors would be out on the battlefield and there would be no anesthesia. So they would just literally ask somebody who was having to get like a quick surgery done to bite down on a bullet to numb or distract them a little bit from the pain that they were going to experience. That's where it came from. Our Gen Z friends in the room, the generation much younger and cooler, and they know everything that I don't understand. There's like idioms and figures of speech that they use too that I'm like still trying to learn, and I'm not going to embarrass myself too much. But like the phrase that I learned this last week is like when you're a fan of something, a big fan, you're a stan of something. And this whole idea of being a stan, it doesn't mean that you're like a creepy fan, but you're really into something. It came from the 2000, which is 22 years ago, Eminem song, Stan. Yeah, we got an Eminem fan on here. Somebody could probably come up and just, rap the whole thing. That'd be an interesting church service. But anyway, to stan something, it came from that. So we have these figures of speech that actually have an origin story to it. All that being said, when Jesus talks about your eyes being healthy, your eyes being unhealthy, he is using a very popular idiom, a very popular figure of speech that his original audience would have picked up just like that. It's the figure of speech to have a good eye or a bad eye. To have a good eye, to see the world in a certain way. To have a bad eye, to see the world in a different way. To have a good eye was in the Hebrew, ayin tovah. Ayin tovah. Just to get out this morning, let's practice this together. Can you guys say ayin tovah together? 1, 2, 3. Ayin tovah. It's to have a good, generous, open, abundant view of the world and of God. Counter to that was an ayin ra'ah. Ayin ra'ah, to have a bad eye, to have an evil eye, to have a stingy eye. Ayin ra'ah. Can you guys say that with me? 1, 2, 3. Ayin ra'ah. Ayin tovah, good eye. Ayin ra'ah, a bad eye, an unhealthy eye. And this is what Jesus is putting down when he's talking about the importance of how we see ourselves, how we see God, how we see others, and how we see stuff. And this is actually found multiple times throughout our scriptures, but our English translators translate it away so there's not as much confusion. Like, for example, in the book of Proverbs, which is 31 chapters of this wisdom that's generally true, we see this in Proverbs, this idea of having a good eye, a healthy eye, and a bad eye, an evil eye. The stingy are eager to get rich and are unaware that poverty awaits them. That phrase, the stingy, in the original language, it actually says those with a bad eye. So they're translating that right away, that the stingy are those with a bad eye, and they're eager to get rich, unaware that poverty awaits them. In the same way, in Proverbs chapter 22, verse 9, the generous will themselves be blessed, for they share their food with the poor. Again, translators are just translating it away. But in the original language, it doesn't say the generous, it says those with a good eye, those with an ayin tovah. And this is such a powerful idea. This is something, honestly, that's just shaping my life over the last 12 months. This question of myself, how am I seeing the world? Am I seeing the world through an ayin tovah, a good eye, or am I seeing my world through an ayin ra'ah, a generous, good eye, or an unhealthy, negative, evil, stingy, bad eye? But here are some of the things that Jesus is saying is so important for the way that we see ourselves. And we need to make sure we have healthy, good eyes, because this is so powerful and different layers in our life. The first layer that we need to talk about is this right here, that to have a good eye sees abundance, but to have a bad eye sees scarcity. To have a good eye sees abundance and possibilities and untold stories that are there to be told. But a bad eye sees scarcity, the glass half empty, that no, we tried that and it did not work. And so we're cynical about it. I'll put it this way. A good eye sees the piece of cheesecake and says, what a gift from God. A bad eye sees the piece of cheesecake and asks about the caloric content. good eye sees abundance and goodness and possibilities over and over again. And don't hear me thinking this is just a lesson on the power of positive thinking and manifesting things. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about some of the deepest truths of humanity in our world. That God is good, that God provides, and that God is creative and loving and kind and abundant, more than we can possibly imagine. This is about the way the world actually is through the fog and through the pain, that this is God's good creation. And the story begins in Genesis 1 with an original blessing before the intruder of sin enters into the story of Genesis 3. That God is ruler still and he is good and kind. To have a good eye, to see the world with generosity and abundance, it reminds us that the world is not a pie. That more slices for somebody else doesn't mean that you receive less. Think about this, that in your business, some other business's success does not automatically mean that it's your loss. With your kids on a sports team, just because another kid gets to play more time doesn't mean that your child loses out in the story of life. When it comes to your financial resources, just because somebody else is being blessed financially and there are more zeros in their account doesn't mean that God is punishing you because you might not have as many zeros in your account. It's just fascinating when you start to try to change the way you're seeing the world, not about like they win and so I lose, but you see it more through the lens of abundance than scarcity. There was this psychologist, this British psychologist by the name of Richard Wiseman, and he did this study a few years back. He was trying to understand what made people lucky and what made people unlucky. Which sounds very scientific, right? He's trying to understand what made somebody lucky in their decisions and in their life and what made people unlucky. And through all of his research, peer-reviewed studies, he determined that there were some things that led all the lucky people to lucky lives or more fortunate outcomes in their life. And it's just fascinating to me because the lucky people in the study, they had an abundance mindset. They always sought out new experiences that they never experienced before. And their world was bigger because of it. They seemed to look on the bright side, that even though something bad happened, they didn't let it devastate them, but they dusted themselves off and they moved to the next venture. They had this belief that, things will ultimately work out. And even if they don't, I'm still breathing. Now, again, I'm not talking about the power of just positive thinking, but aren't there breadcrumbs here that the science have led us to see to the way that God actually has made the world? That there are more possibilities than there are failures, that there is more going on than what we can see. And ultimately, many of us have experienced things in our lives that felt like the worst thing that possibly could happen happened to us. But still today, we're still here. And Wiseman determined that lucky people, people that describe themselves as lucky, they just saw more abundance than they did scarcity. And they saw a blessing on the other side of what many people would call a curse. To see our world with a good eye, you guys, it sees abundance and blessing and goodness and kindness. But to see it with an ayin ra'ah, a bad eye, means that that's not going to work out. Scarcity, I'm always the victim to everything. The next layer of what a good eye and a bad eye shows us is this. That a good eye believes the best about people. A bad eye assumes the worst about people. When there are people that have that reputation, the person who has a trail of dead bodies behind them, people that have had bad relationship experience time and time again, people that you might like to describe as a hot mess. To have a good eye still believes that the best is yet to come and that there are possibilities beyond what you have experienced. A bad eye writes people off. A bad eye says that they're not worth it. Nothing good could ever come from them. And so we judge them and put them in a category of like the misfit toys. It's the belief that they can't change and that people don't really change. It's cynical towards people, and we're untrusting, thinking there's always an ulterior motive behind what they do. That's what having a bad, unhealthy eye leads to. But when you think about these people, isn't it fascinating that we judge other people off of their actions and their behaviors, but when we think about ourselves, we judge ourselves off of our intentions? Well, if I could really explain away what I did there, like I didn't mean to do that. But we automatically, in our human nature, we attack people and judge them by their actions alone, and we never consider their intentions. This is just one of the ways that this teaching from Jesus, it's shaping and challenging me. I heard Brene Brown, who's a psychologist and a writer, she said this, that she tries to operate her life through the lens that says that every person is trying the best they know how. Wow. What a beautiful thought. Let me say that again. That every person is trying the best that they know how. That is a good eye mindset. And let me just be honest with you. I don't operate out of that sometimes. I operate out of, they know better, they've been down this road before, when are they gonna learn? Well, this is just the consequences of their stupid behavior and their stupid thinking. And I operate out of that. But what would it look like if we saw people through a good eye that believed the best in them? You'd be like, yeah, man, it's a mess. They've left a mess behind them too, but they're doing the best that they know how. It's the best that their parents modeled to them. It's the best that their education led them to. It's the best that their surrounding friends have pushed them towards. It's just the best that they know how. And it's not good, but everybody is trying the best that they can. To have a good eye requires us to be bent in that lane to believe the best about people and not be cynical at all. But a bad eye assumes the worst and it judges people negatively. The last layer of what a good eye does and what a bad eye does is that a good eye responds to a need with generosity and open hands, but a bad eye responds to a need with apathy and clenched fists. Let me ask you this. When you see somebody who has a physical need, what is your reflex? Are you wanting to leap out of your seat? Are you wanting to leap for your wallet? Are you wanting to leap to your calendar to make time for you to make a difference with their need? Or are you asking questions? Are you thinking, well, they've been down this road before. Well, what are they going to use this money for? Well, what is the system that led them to this situation? Where do you lean? I often lean in Camp B, if I'm honest with you. And I'm asking a lot more questions in my reflex than I just want to do something because I see a need and I want to have open hands towards that need. A good eye sees that there is a human being behind the issue that led that human being to that place. A good eye sees that there's a person that matters to God beyond that issue that led them to that place. And a good eye doesn't get paralyzed by all the questions and all the history and making somebody fill out a chart before we jump in to assign blame. No. A good eye says that my God is good. He's provided for me. And there's no sense thinking that he'll stop providing for me once I open up my hands for this person who is in need. But a bad eye says, well, I've got to be smart. We got to do our due diligence. And hear me on that. I'm not saying that we throw wisdom out the window. But what is our reflex when it comes to someone who's in need? A good eye, it's about generosity, not being stingy. And you guys, Jesus says that when your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be flooded with life and light. But if you look at the world through a negative, scarcity, stingy, cynical worldview, your whole body will be filled with a light that is actually darkness, because this changes everything that we do as people. This changes how we wake up in the morning, how we walk, how we do our work, how we parent, how we love our significant others. It changes everything because Jesus knew what he was talking about when he said that how you see the world will change what is actually going through your world. But it's in this moment when you might think, okay, it sounds all good on paper, to have a good eye is what I should do, right? I mean, you might be agreeing with me there, even though you see the challenge. But what's amazing about our rabbi and our Lord Jesus is he sort of feels the insecurity and the fear bubbling up in us. He sort of feels where we go next because we're actually going to a place of worry because okay, what if I give too much? What if I'm not taking care of myself in the process? What if this person is someone who's a shyster and there's somebody who's trying to get something from me and they're playing me like a fiddle? And we worry about all these things. And Jesus, in the very next verse, you guys, this isn't like different segmented teaching. Jesus, in a train of thought, goes to the very next verse, and he speaks to our insecurities and our fears, and he says this: "Therefore, I tell you, do not worry about your life, what you will eat or drink, or about your body, what you will wear. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothes? Look at the birds of the air. They do not sow or reap or store away in barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not much more valuable than they? Can any one of you, by worrying, add a single hour to your life?" He's like Captain Obvious, right, guys? But he says it doesn't work that way. And then just a few verses later, he closes out this teaching. He says, "But seek first God's kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well." He says, this is why this is a spiritual thought, and it's just not the power of positive thinking. Because what's shaking underneath the reality of all our life is that there is a God who is good, who we can trust. And before we do anything to earn it, he says that you are my beloved. He says that I created you good and you are my good creation. And I'm going to take care of you because I'm a good father. And seeing that, it changes the way that we do anything. And how could we worry if we truly believed that God was for us and he was with us and that he's going to provide for us? Verse 33 here, he says, "Seek first God's kingdom, God's way of doing things, God's new community of heaven that's now colonizing earth, and his righteousness." And we hear righteousness in our Western language when we think about keeping all the rules. That's someone who's righteous, who does everything right. But in the Hebrew, the word that Jesus would have spoken here for his righteousness is actually the Hebrew word tzedakah. And tzedakah was not about keeping all the rules and being morally upright and having no blot of sin in your life. Righteousness is the idea of generosity, of charity, of compassion. So Jesus is saying, trust his compassion towards you. Trust the way that he is generous and kind to you. And you know what? All these things are going to be taken care of. But what blows my mind is that Jesus, he hears what we're thinking internally with this challenge of having a good, abundant, positive, generous eye towards everything. And he goes, I know you're going to be worried, but here's what I want to remind you of, that you can trust me. I will provide for you as you live in this way. He knows what we're thinking next because there's a part of us that is justice oriented, and there's a part of us that's like, yeah, but what if, because we're kind and generous and we're forgiving and we're thinking positively about other people, and what are they going to get what they deserve? And he continues on with a teaching we looked at just a couple months ago, but through this lens and through this whole train of thought, I think it's very powerful. He says this, he says this very next. Do not judge. Do not judge. I know you want to make sure there's justice for these people that are abusing a system or that have hurt you, or even worse, hurt the ones you love. But do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. So when we talk about judgment here, we got to talk about this. This is where we Hobby Lobby it and rip it out and just put it on Facebook. But we don't understand what's actually going on. You guys know what I'm talking about there. But judgment here, Jesus is not saying that we shouldn't know what's right or wrong, and we shouldn't be able to judge what's right or wrong for us. He's also not saying here that we should get rid of all justice systems. There should be no judges and courtrooms or any kind of civic law. But what Jesus is specifically talking about in judging others is to judge the value of a person. And to judge them and say that, well, they're not worth it. I've seen what they've done in the past. I've seen what I think of their potential is, and I don't think it's much. And it's judging the value of a person and saying that they deserve punishment instead of God's love. He continues on, he says this: why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? We're back to talking about eyes again. Maybe this is all one continuous thought, right? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there's a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. Jesus is still talking about healthy, good eyes and bad eyes. It's the same continuous thought. He's saying, I know you're going to want to get justice. I know you're going to want to feel self-righteous by judging somebody else. But don't play that game. It's going to lead you to wasting your time. There's only one judge. There's only one jury, and that's God alone. So stop wasting your energy. Stop wasting your Facebook statuses. Stop wasting everything to try to feel haughty and high above other people. Because in my kingdom, we don't play that game. So Jesus says, I know it's this good eye life. It's going to lead you to worry. It's going to lead you to wanting judgment for other people. But there's a better way. Trust me and my kingdom and my righteousness. Trust me and you will be taken care of. Is this a powerful message for our cultural moment? Let me think about this. In our cultural moment when it's all about gotcha journalism, when it's all about, oh, did you see what they posted? Did you see what they shared? Did you see what they liked? Did you see who they voted for? And we like to stand on the other side and feel high and mighty and powerful. And I'm talking about people, my friends on the left and the right. Doesn't Jesus just cut through that stuff and say, no, I'm not talking about a left eye or a right eye. I'm talking about having a good eye towards people that I care about, towards needs around us, towards the way we see the world. What a powerful message for our moment. When people are saying everything is getting worse, it's all going to hell in a handbasket. Jesus is saying, no, I'm still king. I'm still in charge. I'm still good, and I want to take care of you, and I want to take care of others through you. Wow, this changes so much for me. This challenges me. It confounds me. It confronts me and my worldview so much. But here's what we got to remember, that Jesus isn't asking us just to agree with it. He's asking us to apprentice him, to follow him, to shadow step him as he does this, to be covered with his dust as he sees the world through a good eye, an ayin tovah. So here's just some thoughts on how we can step into this good life, this good eye lifestyle. First one is this. He calls us. We get dusty when we're generously giving our resources away. When we just reflexively say, what can I do? Instead of having my fists clenched towards my 401k, my savings, what I want to do, the boat that I want to buy, what I want to take as a trip. When we open up our clenched fist and we reflexively say, just because it comes to me doesn't mean that it's for me to consume. Oh man, that's a good eye lifestyle. We recognize that we all have excess in some way. For some of it's shoes, cars. Some of it's cough, cough, electric guitars. It could be anything. That's talking about myself. But just because it comes to us doesn't mean that's for us to consume. You recognize your excess and you respond towards a need for somebody else. Not because a pastor told you to, not because there's a Bible verse that told you to and guiltily made you feel that way. No, because you want to follow Jesus. You want to be dusty like your rabbi, and it's what he did. We've got to be people that generously give and don't get paralyzed by the complexity and the questions and the guilt and the shame and the, what, do they deserve it? No, Jesus followers, we don't do that. We just generously give. Next, another way we can do this is to see potential in everyone. To see the world through a good eye says that nobody is a nobody. We have left that thinking at the door when we follow our Rabbi Jesus. Because everyone matters. Everyone has a story. Everyone is on a different part of their journey. What would it look like for us not to judge people from where they are, but to maybe consider where they came from? I can't believe they're smoking cigarettes. I can't believe they're doing that. Think about what they were smoking a couple years ago. And celebrate the win, that there is potential in everyone. So may we be followers of Jesus that don't get stuck in the complexity of thinking, oh yeah, but I saw what they posted on Facebook. I saw that thing, or I saw this in their yard. I saw this stuff. No, we don't play that game at all. Followers of Jesus, we have to move in a different place because this is our whole story. We look at people and their potential in everyone. And trust me, I'm stepping on my own toes if I'm stepping on yours as well. But this is what my rabbi, what he commands, what he expects of me is to see potential in everyone. And the last step that we can take is this: to practice acts of loving kindness. Acts of loving kindness in the Hebrew and in the Jewish practice is this: it's Gemilut Hasadim. And I'm not going to make you repeat that one after me. Gemilut Hasadim. And it's not giving to charity. It's more costly than that. Gemilut Hasadim is not giving somebody $10 so they can buy themselves lunch. It's inviting them to lunch in your home and cooking for them. Opening up a chair at your table, pulling out for them so they can sit with you. In Jewish practice today, Gemilut Hasadim is used in caring for the sick, sitting with those as they mourn. But Gemilut Hasadim for us, it could be that, but it's more, it's having good eyes to see the needs around us and then inserting ourselves into the story. Seeing that there's darkness around us and not just being like, well, the world's a broken place, but no, seeing darkness around us and pushing back against it and says that, no, my rabbi says that it's his kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven, so I'm going to be a part of that mission to push back against that darkness. You guys, we're not doing the Bridges Outreach thing, having mentors in schools. I don't spend 30 minutes of my week over at Elwood Haynes just so it's a nice thing to do. It's what's expected of me. No, I do that because I want to partner with God. I want to put my skin in the game, get my knees skinned up, get my fingernails dirt underneath of them in the work of pushing back against the darkness. And that's why we're inviting you to consider mentoring either at Bon Air or Elwood Haynes or another local elementary school so that we can push back against the darkness. It's different than just dropping a $50 check or dropping some change. It's you getting your skin in the game. It's this Gemilut Hasadim. I have a friend who goes to church here. She happens to be in this service. I'm not going to embarrass her. But her name's Debbie Donahue. And a couple months ago, she asked me to come to CAM, which is this incredible nonprofit downtown Kokomo that helps bring God's love to those in our community that are experiencing homelessness. And I came to just speak at their staff meeting. I was actually like 15 minutes late. That's my bad. But I came to speak and pray with their staff team. And then I got a tour and I got to hear about the work that they do at CAM. I got to hear about some of the needs because I was unaware of the amount of people experiencing homelessness in our community. But CAM, they have this incredible, supply closet for people to come in and to be blessed so they can go out and stay warm. They have classes and, counselors and people that walk with them as they're transitioning from homelessness, hopefully back into having a roof over their heads and into the job market. They do this incredible thing with different shelters, day shelters, a men's shelter, a family shelter, hot coffee, water for people experiencing homelessness. And it was in this meeting with Debbie that, she shared about some of the needs that they had, just physical, practical needs they had in their supply closet to bless people in our community. And I was just like, oh my gosh, this is so simple. They need men's jeans. They need new men's jeans. They need men's underwear, new men's underwear. They need outerwear for men's hats and face masks to wear outside because it's hard to believe, but winter is coming close. And I thought to myself, because here at Bridgeway, we don't play church, but we exist to partner with God and what he is up to. I thought this is a beautiful example of how today, just a little bit of kingdom conspiracy, we could practice pushing back against the darkness. We could practice Gemilut Hasadim together. So I got these instructions up on the screen. I want to challenge us to do this today. There's a simple way that we can all give to provide a pair of jeans. There's a simple way that we can give to provide some things. Because I want to stock out this supply closet for the hundreds of people that they'll be able to serve this year. So take a picture of the screen. You can actually do this, text this right away. But I just have a feeling that we can actually do this. And here's why I think this is a powerful example of a good eye lifestyle, you guys. Because the bad eye would say, but why are they homeless? Well, what led them to this? And those are all questions. They're valid questions. but a good eye just responds with open hands. So I'm going to challenge everybody to be a part of this today. And this is not like a huge thing that we've been planning forever. I mean, this was like on Friday. But I thought this was something that we could do so that we practice this good eye life. Because here's the reality, you guys, that Jesus walked through his entire life with a good eye. He shared tables with people that others thought were notorious sinners that he shouldn't have been hanging out with. He called Matthew, who was a tax collector, who was a traitor to his nation, and said, I want you to come follow me. I believe you're more than what people say about you. And he ultimately gave his life away on a cross in an act of love that took his breath away. And 2,000 years later, it still takes our breath away because the act of love that he showed. And as you follow him, as you apprentice him, let's do the same for others. Because I have a news flash for you, that Jesus has a good eye towards you. He has a good eye towards me. He sees the mess that we've made. He sees our brokenness, our bad, destructive habits, but he still loves you. He believes in you, and he's calling you to follow him and partner with him. So if my rabbi has a good eye towards the world, and he tells me that I need to have a good eye, I have no choice. I've got to bend towards that. So that's what we're doing today. May we get dusty from our rabbi because of the way that we're generous and kind, and the way we believe the best in people, and we see the abundance and possibilities more than we see the brokenness and the pain.